Well, hi everyone, thanks for joining today. This presentation will be a quick look at Oracle GoldenGate, providing an overview across the entire platform. We'll shoot for around a 45-minute presentation to cover all the different capabilities, features, and use cases of GoldenGate. So with that, let's go ahead and jump straight in. The agenda for today, we'll take a quick look at the background, where the technology comes from, what kind of success it's had in the market. Then we'll get into a little bit closer look at the core use cases that GoldenGate covers. There's been some changes over the years from the original use cases to some of the more common use cases today, so we'll take a look at that. Then we'll get into the feature functionality review of what we provide in GoldenGate for both Oracle as well as non-Oracle databases. We'll cover the use of GoldenGate in the cloud and also for SaaS applications, software as a service. And then we'll also wrap up with a look at GoldenGate for big data and streaming. So jumping straight in. For background, the GoldenGate technology base has actually been around for over 20 years at this point. In the beginning, the Oracle GoldenGate technology existed as part of the startup GoldenGate, the company, in the San Francisco Bay Area. And actually the very first use case that the GoldenGate technology covered as part of the startup was for high availability and disaster recovery of tandem nonstop databases. Back in those years, the vast majority of the ATM cache networks in the United States were running on top of the tandem nonstop infrastructure and required a solution for high availability disaster recovery to make sure that if the backend systems crashed or if the cache machines crashed, that people wouldn't lose their money, that the transactions would be safe and consistent, and that the systems were as available as possible for 99.9999% of the time. So that was the original use case. And again, we started with the tandem nonstop databases, but over time, more databases were added. So of course, Oracle database, SQL Server database, DB2 mainframe, DB2 for AS400, and so on and so forth, with this core kind of foundation use case being used for high availability disaster recovery. And in the same bucket, we also see the high availability use cases also being used as part of database migrations as well. What happened is over time, more use cases got added, still kind of staying in the lane with database to database replication. We saw OLTP replication get very popular, where it's really synchronizing reference data or synchronizing application databases, not necessarily providing high availability, but for the purpose of doing data integration, synchronizing database tables between two different applications, for example, or two different databases. The data warehouse emergence that happened in the early 2000s, really around the rise of the engineered data warehouse platform. If you think back in those years, the technologies such as Teradata, Netezza, Oracle Exadata V1, Greenplum, Paracel, a whole host of other data warehouse technologies, Vertica, for example. Really, those were the golden years, if you will, of the engineered data warehouse for optimized read-specific queries on large-scale data warehouses. And GoldenGate really rode that wave in the industry for quite a while, being used to trickle feed or stage the data into these engineered data warehouses. Again, the value proposition in those days was really about reducing the workload on the source system, kind of replacing ETL type tools for batch processing and eliminating batch windows, and then providing real-time feeds into data warehouses. But then, of course, what happened in the data warehouse market is that it got completely disrupted by the emergence of Hadoop at first, and then eventually the cloud, where people began to shift their longer-term storage for data analytics into object store, into Hadoop file system, into other distributed environments. And so GoldenGate kind of went along with that flow, and GoldenGate's high growth use cases over those years were really about doing what we call data lake ingestion, providing a continuous stream of events and of data into these large-scale analytic repositories, whether those are on the cloud or in on-premise environments such as Cloudera and Hortonworks data lakes. And so that's been a very big growth area for GoldenGate over the last few years. And then most recently, what we've seen is the shift for people looking to use GoldenGate for processing events after it's been staged into the data lake. And so GoldenGate can, of course, replicate data for all these different use cases. But then downstream from the replication, typically customers have to process data as well. And so expanding those use cases into some of the more recent GoldenGate capabilities around stream processing have been a real growth area for the GoldenGate product in the last several years. So by and large, again, GoldenGate's been around for over 20 years at this point. It's had continuous growth over all those years, providing a larger and larger footprint in the marketplace. And today is one of the most successful, if not the most successful, integration software for enterprise class integration in the history of enterprise software. So very good success with this product, and a lot of different core kind of foundation use cases covered. We've over the years received a lot of industry recognition from some of the major analysts that cover this, but most importantly, we've received recognition from our customers that rate GoldenGate products on some of these analyst websites as well. So we've seen, again, really good validation from third parties and, of course, our customers as well. There are around 7,500 customers globally in over 180 countries. You know, for me personally, a lot of my relatives don't understand a lot of the high-tech jargon that I work on in the industry, but when I'm able to kind of share the use cases that we cover, if I'm buying coffee at a local coffee shop or doing some shopping in my favorite grocery store, maybe I'm riding along in somebody's vehicle, I can explain where GoldenGate is used to provide high availability from whether it's swiping a credit card or using a loyalty program. Even updating my user profile on LinkedIn. So any of those normal kind of day-to-day moments or everyday moments, I like to say, are affected by GoldenGate transactions, whether it's providing data integration on the back end or high availability, disaster recovery, real-time analytics. These everyday moments are there in large part because of the GoldenGate infrastructure operating on the back end. So whether you know it or not, or whether our families know it or not, we're touched by GoldenGate transactions, probably hundreds of times per day, just moving through the world and leaving our digital fingerprints across the board. So lots of wonderful customers and customer use cases here for GoldenGate. What does GoldenGate do? GoldenGate is really the backbone for providing replication of real-time data transactions and events. So it used to be focused really on database or relational events, but now we also cover non-relational as well as application integrations. And it's really about providing that real-time framework for doing event replication from a variety of different sources on the left-hand side of this chart to a wide variety of different targets on the right-hand side of this chart. And we also provide the GoldenGate Stream Analytics platform for doing the stream processing. We can take those events and we can do ETL, we can do real-time analysis, we can do time series analysis, geospatial analysis, all in line to the GoldenGate platform. So it's really a broad-based technology used for data integration, used for stream processing, still continues to be used for database migrations, as well as disaster recovery and high availability. So broad set of use cases. The number one attribute, if you will, for GoldenGate is that it's really all about real-time data, real-time events, and being able to provide world-class data integration at a global scale in true real-time timeframes. So that's what GoldenGate does. For background, let's take a look at some of the core use cases that GoldenGate provides. So as we've said, the heart of GoldenGate really lies in doing these database to database patterns. And that's where the technology came from when the GoldenGate, the company, was a startup vendor in San Francisco. And still today, we see a huge foundation of use cases with these patterns, but there's the unidirectional pattern for replicating from database A to database B. There's the bidirectional pattern, which is often used for active-active or dual active databases. There's the peer-to-peer model, which can also be set up for what's called multi-master replication. So if you're continuously keeping 3 or more primaries in sync with one another, you can use GoldenGate for that. There's the broadcast. Sometimes we call this a fan-out model, where we go from a single database to multiple databases, for example, sharing reference data. There's the consolidation model, which is a typical Kimball or Inman style of data architecture, where you go OLTP to operational data store to enterprise data warehouse. And then there's the distribution model, where we're actually posting events out of the database to messaging systems, which leads us to the next layer up, which a lot of the use cases for GoldenGate, especially in the last 5 to 7 years or so, have been around these non-relational patterns. So ingesting data to data lakes, ingesting data into streaming platforms, ingesting data to the cloud, doing messaging-based replication for event to event using JMS or Kafka or MQTT. Others, we have NoSQL replication, so replicating key value pairs across KVP stores. And then now, most recently, we've added SaaS application replication as well, so that you can receive application events directly coming out of a variety of different SaaS applications. So these patterns are also core to the GoldenGate replication frameworks. But then as you kind of climb that ladder into functional use cases, you start to get into these use cases that matter a lot more for the business. For example, performing analysis on the data while it's in motion and in memory, supporting data transformations, manipulating and processing the data to prepare it for analytics. You can do data preparation, you can build data pipelines. All of this, of course, is integrated directly with the GoldenGate core application frameworks. And then there's these analysis patterns where you can do time series analysis on the data while it's in motion and in memory. You don't have to store the data in order to perform this analysis. You can do geofencing based on latitude and longitude values, but also based on various beacon technology. I can set up real-time alerts and take actions based off of events that are happening in certain locations. And then, of course, I can embed predictive analytics by taking machine learning models that have been produced by my data science team and operationalizing them into a production flow. For example, to score customer loyalty, or to provide mean ratio of failure rates for parts and manufacturing, even to do fraud detection, for example. Anything that you need done with transactions that are moving through in real time, you can bring those machine learning scoring models and plug them into this tool. So taken together, the GoldenGate platform really does span a pretty broad base of these data integration and analysis, event analysis use cases. So from database to database, non-relational to non-relational, cloud to ground, as well as data pipelines, ETL in real time, and the various kinds of analytics on the data as well. So broad set of use case capabilities in the tool. When I think about the vision for what we're building towards in the next few years as a platform, it's really about providing a set of functionality that brings the data consumers together with the data producers, where you have data producers typically in IT organization building connections like from DBAs or data engineers, but your data consumers are typically data product owners that are looking to build solutions for the business. And so what we're aiming to do with the GoldenGate platform is provide a single pane of glass or a single control point for bringing the data consumers together with these data producers. And then the infrastructure itself, the GoldenGate technology, whether that's the replication frameworks or the stream processing frameworks, can be deployed in a distributed service mesh. So that means we can run across clouds, across containers, for example, using Docker and Kubernetes. And then in our architecture, we're also seeing more and more uptake around edge deployment. So being able to deploy on the edges of the networks and not only in the data centers. So these are all very valid kind of deployment architectures to support what we call this real-time distributed data mesh. So what's available today in terms of how it works? You've got DBAs or GoldenGate operations people that can use the GoldenGate technology directly through what we call the microservices graphical user interface. You've got the data engineers and the data analysts that can work directly in the Stream Analytics application, again, which is entirely browser-based and web-based application. From an infrastructure perspective, you bring your own messaging framework, which is typically something like Apache Kafka. And you can also bring your own Spark environment, which is used for executing the data processing pipelines. Any of these technologies can be deployed in containers in your own private data centers, but they can also be deployed in the public cloud using cloud services from Oracle, of course, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, but also from Amazon, Azure, and really any other cloud provider as well. So it's a very flexible and distributed type of architecture that can run across these different environments, and that's exactly what's available today. So that's what we're building out here with the GoldenGate data integration platform. It's really focused on data consumers, low-code environments for bringing together the consumers of the data with the producers of the data. It's event-centric. It revolves around ledger-based framework for accessing systems of record. It's distributed in nature, multi-cloud, microservices-based, service mesh. It's capable of working with polyglot data types, which is data of many formats, but also with preserving ACID transactions. Again, GoldenGate's heritage and DNA is around providing disaster recovery and high availability for mission critical systems that run banks, for example, run payments platforms. And so it's very good at preserving those transaction semantics where you want to be assured that the data remains consistent and valid across a variety of different planned and unplanned events. It's a very well-governed environment. We have various tools and technologies for providing lineage and data catalog capabilities, as well as validation and verification of data sets across the ecosystem. And obviously it's enterprise class with more than 7,000 customers globally and some of the largest businesses in the world. So let's take a look, a little bit of a drill down here into what we've got on GoldenGate for Oracle and non-Oracle databases. When we look at the core of the GoldenGate technology, we're generally on a release cycle now of about one major release per year. And over the years, we've had a number of significant improvements in the GoldenGate core. The product today here in 2020 is quite a different software architecture than what we saw, even 5 to 10 years ago. In fact, back in GoldenGate 12.3, one of the biggest changes that happened in the GoldenGate architecture is around the introduction of what we call the microservices architecture. So GoldenGate was one of the first enterprise software products in the industry actually to fully cut over to a microservices architecture. We have now based the entire runtime framework of GoldenGate around microservices, and each GoldenGate deployed component has its own embedded REST HTTP server, and it's a fully RESTful API. Even some of the tools that we've included to preserve compatibility with legacy systems, such as our command line interface, on the back end, they all produce REST API calls. So you can actually use your command line client as through a remote connection via REST APIs to your microservices, which could be really deployed anywhere on the network. So that's been one of the biggest changes that's been made on the GoldenGate architecture framework. Each year that we release, there's typically several major feature improvements, and then a whole host of things that we do every release cycle around performance and security, for example. One of the other things that's happened recently, back in GoldenGate 19.1, we introduced cross-Endian remote capture for Oracle databases. That means you can now run GoldenGate on a mid-tier host and still extract transactions or capture real-time events from Oracle databases running on any operating system you like. And we will normalize the Endianness of the data on the GoldenGate host, and then you can run, keep GoldenGate on Linux, and you can capture from Solaris or HPUX or anything you like, and then move it downstream to whatever environment you like. So much more flexible way of using GoldenGate rather than having to install it on the host system for those platforms that are working on a different Endian level. So how does GoldenGate work itself, and what does it do? For those that aren't familiar with a logical replication solution, the class of software that the GoldenGate replication framework is in is something called logical replication. And that's in contrast to what we might refer to as physical replication. Physical replication would typically be moving the blocks at the storage level, so completely unaware of the software that's running on top of your hard drive, for example. You might just copy a set of blocks from one hard drive to another hard drive. That's called physical replication. GoldenGate is a logical replication tool. So what that means is we are reading the transaction logs from the different databases that produce them. So in the case of the Oracle database, there's something inside the Oracle database called online redo logs, or ORLs. So these online redo logs are constantly recording the story of what's happening to that database, whether it's from one or more applications or one or more ETL tools, DBA users. Everything that happens to that database engine is recorded in the online redo logs. And this is part of what's used for backup and restore capabilities. It's also preserving the state of the database itself so that you get guaranteed consistency. And what GoldenGate does is it interacts with those online redo logs, and it captures them and then replays them across the network to some other target. So if you look over on the right, you can replay those online redo logs over into other databases that are not Oracle. You can replay them into key value stores, messaging systems, cloud frameworks, for example, object storage. And what GoldenGate does in the middle is it takes the different online redo logs, not only from the Oracle database, but any of the other databases that GoldenGate supports, and we convert those into a GoldenGate protocol called Trail. So the GoldenGate Trail is the common protocol that, regardless of which database you're capturing from, we move the data in this GoldenGate Trail format. This is a lot like a log in and of itself, and what will happen is you have different consumers who are at different points in the log. They might be reading at different rates, for example, or applying at different rates. GoldenGate keeps track of all the different writers and readers that are going on through the what we call the extract and the replicate process. And you can have one set of logs being read from one source, and you can replay those logs to many multiple targets or multiple replicates. And that's really what the GoldenGate software does, is it keeps track of all those logs and allows you to replay them across the wire. And by the way, it's not just transaction commits, which is the DML. We also keep track of schema changes, as well as, especially for the Oracle database, procedure execution as well. So it allows you to replay kind of a rich set of semantics. The other thing that I'll say on this chart is that this is a true real-time system. So we are able to capture, millions of events per second in some cases from the database and replay those over the wire. It's a very fast point-to-point connection that's used for high availability disaster recovery scenarios at great distance. And so there's some academic communities, there's a discussion or a debate about what constitutes, real-time, hard real-time versus soft real-time versus near real-time. GoldenGate is about as real-time as it gets when it comes to computing anything over the network. We are capturing transactions and replaying those transactions on very low-level protocols directly to the targets in some cases in a very fast manner, and in order to provide millisecond level failover capabilities between sites that are at great distance, hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. So you can get very, very good performance out of GoldenGate at very, very large scale. In fact, some of the numbers that we see here in real world scenarios are very impressive in terms of, we have a very large bank that sees real world performance of around 1.5 terabytes of redo logs per hour on a single table. So this is, quite a large application, and if you can imagine producing 1.5 terabytes of partial supplemental logs per hour, that's a lot of transactions happening on this table, and we're able to capture those transactions at very high speed and replay those over the network. We see a large Fortune 200 manufacturing customer in Asia that sees real world performance of 1 million transactions per second. We invest quite a lot in non-Oracle database technologies as well, so we can see 4 billion transactions a day on DB2. We have a huge bank in China that sees 55,000 transactions per second from DB2 mainframe to their data lake. We see a large bank in Latin America that sees 45,000 transactions per second from DB2 iSeries into Amazon managed Kafka service. SQL Server is a very solid platform for us, a lot of customers running at high volume. And then for Kafka, I believe we've got some of the largest Kafka deployments in the world run GoldenGate for feeding transactions into Kafka. And so we see really petabytes per day on very large scale customers like eBay and LinkedIn and others, many others. So quite a lot of strong performance characteristics from GoldenGate globally. When we look at one of the main areas where we've made significant investments in GoldenGate in the past 5 years, it's been around usability, and so providing a very easy to use user interface. This is similar, this is the web interface to the microservices, and so similar to how you may have a Wi-Fi router in your closet at home that's providing internet to your house, every GoldenGate deployment has its own embedded HTTP server, and these web pages all get delivered directly from those GoldenGate components. And so you've got administration service, performance management service, or performance metric service. You've got distribution, server receiver service, etc. So very easy to use, intuitive web-based interface for all the GoldenGate components. These microservices, they can run in one single host, which is a mid-tier host, different from the databases. They can still run on the database host if that's what you prefer, and they can also be distributed across on-premise and cloud environments. They can be fully containerized. GoldenGate itself, basically the administration service is kind of the heart of the GoldenGate deployments. That's where you manage your what we call extracts and replicates, which capture the transactions and replay the transactions. The metrics service is where you go to do monitoring and evaluate things like lag and latency and performance of your replications. The distribution service can be used to send GoldenGate Trail protocol across the wide area network, and the receiver service can receive GoldenGate Trail protocol from across the wide area network. So these microservices, one of the nice things about this is this allows our customers to run GoldenGate in a much simpler to manage, simpler to maintain environment using a single entry point. In this case, you can protect it through something like Nginx or reverse proxy, opening a single set of a single port, and then driving all of your communications administration activity through a web browser, basically. In fact, the transactions can also flow through secure sockets or HTTPS as well. So much more simple, cloud-friendly way of operating GoldenGate at scale. I mentioned already that we've done the Endian normalization. GoldenGate can be fully deployed on a mid-tier host. You can capture from Oracle database on Solaris, HPUX, IBM AIX, or Red Hat Linux, any of the other flavors of Linux that the database supports. And all of the Endian normalization occurs in the mid-tier. So nothing has to be installed on any of the databases. on the left-hand side. We actually support the remote connectivity with DB2 AIX or iSeries, DB2 ZOS, also DB2 LUW on Red Hat. We support remote connectivity to Windows SQL Server, Postgres on Red Hat, and also MySQL on Red Hat. And so you can run GoldenGate remotely. Again, you do not have to have any GoldenGate software installed on any of these databases in order to capture transactions. And then you can replay those transactions downstream to any supported GoldenGate target. Now, importantly, this capability is all backwards compatible. So you can go backwards to Oracle Database 11.204 and higher. You can use GoldenGate 19 on database 11.204 and higher. You can also have GoldenGate 19 interacting with older versions of GoldenGate as well. So you can have GoldenGate 12.3 connecting as a, let's say, a target to a GoldenGate 19 that's capturing from any one of these databases shown on this chart. So very flexible deployment model. You can mix and match versions, and you can go backwards to older versions as well. So from a non-Oracle side, we continue to invest heavily in GoldenGate for non-Oracle databases. It's a huge part of our global business for our customers that standardize on GoldenGate technology in their data centers. They typically are using GoldenGate with a variety of different databases, DB2, SQL Server, MySQL, Tandem Nonstop, MariaDB, Sybase, et cetera. And so we continue to invest in all of these platforms and technologies. And any of the typical database patterns, the broadcast, the consolidation, the bidirectional, the unidirectional, all of these patterns are supported in the non-Oracle formats as well. So this is an area that would continue to work directly with these vendors, as well as supporting our own certifications and developments on these technologies as well. In fact, that focus on heterogeneous non-Oracle platforms, really the enterprise strength capabilities, has been recognized by a number of analysts in the industry, and has been a big part of why GoldenGate and Oracle receives strong customer references and recognition from industry analysts around the customer recognition that we receive through those third-party websites. So it's again part of the foundation of strength from Oracle in this capacity. So let's take a look now at GoldenGate for cloud and SaaS applications. GoldenGate is, of course, a multi-cloud capable piece of software. So you can actually run GoldenGate on Oracle Cloud. You can run it on Amazon Cloud. You can run it on Azure Cloud or Google Cloud. You can connect to any of your on-prem data stores using VPN connectivity, for example. In Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, we have something called Fast Connect. And then GoldenGate is also certified, of course, with all of the mainstream Oracle cloud services that do data processing. So you can use GoldenGate to send data into Exadata cloud service, into database cloud service on virtual machines, as well as bare metal. You can do bidirectional replication with autonomous databases, including autonomous transaction processing and autonomous data warehouse. You can send data into OCI Object Store, and you can also send data into the OCI streaming service for messaging. So very flexible tie-ins with cloud, particularly with Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. One of the big use cases that we support on the cloud side is through connectivity with various SaaS applications. So if you have any Oracle SaaS applications, such as Fusion applications for financials or supply chain or human capital management, or even Retail Cloud for customer engagement, Merchandising Cloud, point of service, Oracle Transportation Management, even if you might be running some of the older ERP environments from a private cloud or from a public cloud compute, like JD Edwards or Siebel, you can still use Oracle GoldenGate as a way of capturing transactions directly out of those applications. On the SaaS side, there's built-in integrations you would use. For private cloud, you would go directly against the database, and then we also support Kafka Connect frameworks into our stream processing environment, and that, of course, integrates with Push Topics API or enterprise messaging for Salesforce.com. So all of these different capabilities are packaged into the stream processing and GoldenGate capabilities as well. There's actually a very unique service in the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, something called OCI Marketplace or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Marketplace. What it allows you to do, this is the only place you can get it. We've made a image of the latest versions of Oracle GoldenGate available there that you can quickly provision using something called a Terraform Stack Builder. So in less than 5 minutes, you can have a fully provisioned environment of Oracle GoldenGate available for you to begin doing development with, all through various point-and-click browser-based interfaces. There's actually a free promotion for this going on right now through the remainder of calendar year 2020. You can use the GoldenGate software for free just by trying it in the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Marketplace. So definitely worth a look. You can quickly get going. I think this is an interesting one for customers that might be familiar with some of the older versions of GoldenGate. This would be a great, kind of simple and inexpensive way to try the Microservices edition of GoldenGate and start to get familiar with some of the latest capabilities that come with GoldenGate Microservices. The images that we have in the marketplace, again, we've got GoldenGate Microservices, which I've mentioned. This is a great way to get familiar with it. We do support the GoldenGate Classic architecture as well for customers doing what we call lift and shift migrations. We have GoldenGate for big data, which is for targeting various big data environments. We also do GoldenGate for mainframe. You can do remote connectivity, remote extract, as well as delivery to DB2 Z series on premise. And then we also support GoldenGate for non-Oracle databases as well. So take a look at this, really interesting set of capabilities on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Marketplace. The format of this image is pretty interesting. Again, I'm showing you the microservices one here, but we have prepackaged the database client library, so that's all built into the image. And you also have very intuitive way of using a shared wallet to connect to Autonomous Database. So if somebody's using, for example, the free edition of Oracle Autonomous Database and they want to replicate data from their on-premise database into Oracle Autonomous Database, you can use this marketplace image for Oracle GoldenGate pretty quickly. It has all the client libraries packaged in, and it has all the shared wallet integrations built in as well. So it's a great, kind of quick and easy way to get started. Down the road, we will be offering a fully managed version of the GoldenGate service, and so we'll offer that in both a dedicated format where our customers will get a fully managed GoldenGate instance running in their own dedicated compute, and then we'll also offer a serverless model of that where we'll have multi-tenant pooled resources for customers that are looking for, let's say, lighter weight or more ephemeral type of GoldenGate consumption as part of a serverless architecture. So fully managed in this case means that we're going to take care of a lot of the lifecycle controls, the monitoring, administration, and one of the key things is that we'll take care of all the patching and upgrades for you over time as well. So this service in the future will cover all of the normal GoldenGate use cases for database to database replication, non-relational use cases for big data and data lakes, and we're also going to be including stream processing capabilities on here as well, so that any of the streaming analytics and streaming ETL use cases will be available as part of this public cloud fully managed GoldenGate service. So the last section for today that we'll cover is around GoldenGate for big data and streaming. And for this use case, it's pretty interesting. It's been one of the hottest growth areas in the market for GoldenGate in the past several years. what we're seeing is that generally speaking, when customers are ready to go with an industrial strength solution for their data lakes, they typically come to GoldenGate. In many cases, they might have tried, open source only solutions. They might have tried ETL tools. They might have tried some other, niche vendors or smaller vendors for doing data replication. GoldenGate is really a technology that can operate very reliably at great scale. And so when you have an industrial use case for a data lake and you need to start to treat it as part of the business and operate it with the same kinds of service levels that other IT systems operate at, GoldenGate is a very attractive solution. And again, typically it's displacing or replacing some other technology that was tried before. Replication in general has some huge benefits. For example, when compared to ETL tools or open source tools, replication technology in general produces much less overhead on the source system. So if you have a situation where your company has one group managing the data lake that's different from the group that manages the application databases, replication can be a very attractive solution because it minimizes the hit that the application database team takes by providing events and data to the data lake team. The other thing that's really interesting about replication or logical replication into the data lake is that if you have a data science use case, your data scientists on the data lake side typically want to see as much event data as possible, meaning they want to see all of the intermediary events that happen throughout the day. They don't only want to see the batch windows. So for example, if you use an ETL tool and you batch the data in, let's say once every 24 hours, your data scientists will only see the state change of the data every 24 hours. They see snapshots separated by hours or days. And with replication, it's quite the opposite. You actually see every change event, every change action continuously throughout the day. So if you're trying to do things like perform data science to model, your consumer behavior, your customer behavior, look at fraud patterns for transaction events, it actually becomes critical to be able to see the intermediate change events that are happening continuously throughout the day. And that's exactly what you get by doing the log analytics or taking the transaction logs through a framework like a replication tool. So that's why we see people going for GoldenGate for big data. Very often they're tapping into some existing GoldenGate deployment, which can be done very inexpensively. There's no performance penalty for splitting a trail to feed the data lake. So if you already have GoldenGate deployed for a specific data integration scenario or a high availability scenario, with a couple line change to a GoldenGate parameter file, you can begin to distribute or feed that data downstream to other targets, which could be Apache Kafka or other Apache frameworks for doing data lake processing. And there's no additional performance penalty taken by the source systems whatsoever. And so it's quite attractive just to add this on. When we look at the use cases that are included with GoldenGate for big data, it's basically everything in the top two rows of that chart that we looked at earlier in this presentation. So you would normally use the GoldenGate for Oracle and the GoldenGate for non-Oracle databases to get the bottom row. But when you go into GoldenGate for big data, you get all of the non-relational use cases in the middle row, and you also get the stream processing use cases in the top row. So from a capability standpoint, these are all the different capabilities that you get with the product area called GoldenGate for big data. This is the list of all of the functionality that's included there. So from a source perspective, you get Java messaging service, you get Cassandra, and then there's a rich roadmap of additional sources coming, such as Apache Kafka and MongoDB, et cetera, for the big data sources. And then from a target perspective, you have all the existing capabilities around Hadoop file system, Hive, HBase, Kafka, Amazon's flavor of Kafka, Google's flavor of Kafka, et cetera, Elasticsearch, all the different key value pair stores like NoSQL engines, Mongo, Cassandra. You get the different cloud vendors for object storage, both Oracle, you get S3 for Amazon, Google Cloud for Object Store, Azure Blob Store. You get JDBC, JMS capabilities, Azure Data Lake, you get Kinesis and Redshift, and all these other capabilities are included. And then what happens on the streaming side, over on the right-hand side of this chart, anytime the data is coming from a GoldenGate technology, so let's say you have any GoldenGate supported source and the data is flowing through GoldenGate replication, you can use any of these streaming capabilities for free as part of the license as well. So there's a license included to the Stream Analytics environment where you can do low-code development, you can do ETL operations, you can do event correlations, alerting, time series analysis, geospatial analytics, classification, statistical inference, plug-in machine learning, et cetera. So all those capabilities are included as well. So let's take a look at these different capabilities. From a formatting perspective, the supported formats, this is the syntax of the data, if you will. The native formats of the targets are all supported, including sequence files. You've got delimited text, JSON, Avro, of course, is hugely popular for Kafka. It can also support XML or Parquet for compressed formats, etc. So a lot of different file formats depending on your preferred big data target. And then we also support the stream processing. So we're not only landing the data into the big data environment, we're also allowing you to do the ingestion and the processing of the data as well. So in this model, your data can come from GoldenGate. You also have the option to produce data by Kafka or JMS directly as well. The way that your developers use this, they select different inbuilt patterns to accelerate development. It's a fully graphical UI, point and click operations. You build out a robust data pipeline for doing data pipeline processing, and then you can have various outputs and various formats supported in there for doing anything from alerting, for example, sending SMS text messages. You can produce OLAP cubes for doing time series snapshots and cube analytics. You can build dashboards directly in this tool for looking at inbuilt time series across sliding time windows. And you can also output the data directly to data warehouses and to data lakes for more static analysis downstream as well. The history of this stream processing technology actually goes back over 10 years. We've got 70 patents protecting the different detailed ways of doing query processing. Historically, a lot of the IP originated in the era of what we call event processing. And originally, this was built around more of a data grid or a Java data grid based framework. And what we did is approximately 3 to 4 years ago, we decided to refactor the technology so that this event processing engine can run natively inside of Apache frameworks like Apache Kafka and Apache Spark streaming. And so we've basically now enabled this whole technology stack to run on open source frameworks from an engine and a capability standpoint, but the core intellectual property of all of the different event processing patterns, the query languages, the types of semantics we can support with the time window based analytics, those are all still part of this core framework, even though it's running on open source. And so you get this low code environment where you can interactively build your data pipelines while you actually watch the live output of the data, and you're actually seeing your data change while you're developing the pipeline. So it's a very intuitive way of working with your data pipelines. And again, what's unique about this compared to a lot of tools is that that you see your results while you're doing the development. And that's just one of the big advantages over some of the open source only capabilities that you might get, say, doing native development on Spark by itself. You get this nice low-code environment with a really rich graphical UI. But more importantly, from a transaction semantic standpoint, you get true record-by-record processing. So this underlying engine, we call the CQL engine, the continuous query language engine, automatically timestamps all the transactions that are occurring, whether your processing intervals are 1 millisecond or 1 second or 10 seconds. You're going to preserve the correct ordering of events. You're going to see the transaction boundaries that are sent in through GoldenGate correctly observed, and you're going to get, the kind of exactly once processing semantics. Even, though this is still running on Spark, you're actually getting the benefits of the event processing semantics of the Stream Analytics engine. And so it's actually an improvement on Spark in that regard, to handle a richer set of windowing functions, as well as a more robust set of fault tolerance capabilities, allowing for outages to occur on the source side, on the target side, on the messaging side, inside the Spark nodes themselves. And so it's a very rich framework that's actually a big step up from just doing pure open source, not only from a user interface perspective, but actually from a transaction consistency standpoint. It's a big upgrade from open source only. So these built-in streaming patterns are part of how we accelerate development, or allow your developers to accelerate their development. You can take patterns like uptrends or correlations, duplicate elimination, time series patterns like A not followed by B, and you can basically bring those into your pipelines directly for analysis, and without having to reinvent the pattern each time you actually want to bring that into your data pipeline. So kind of having those templatized pre-built patterns is a big accelerator for development. The time series analytics is surely one of the more popular types of analytics that we see being used in this framework. And so in this tool, you define different kinds of windowing functions. Let's take, for example, a sliding window of time. Maybe you have 15 minutes where you're evaluating different events happening across those 15 minutes, and you're trying to do something to detect anomalies. It could be anything from looking at refrigerators that get too warm, to engines that exceed their tolerance for specifications, to looking also at trading patterns that might be predictive of fraud. It could be any of those and more. But all of them have the same characteristic, where you're looking for anomalies in the data sets or the data values over some period of time, whether that's 5 seconds, 15 minutes, or 5 hours. You can define that window of time, and then you basically build different thresholds into the policy framework for this engine. And whenever those policies are exceeded, or those thresholds are exceeded, you can do things. You can take actions on REST web services. You can send alerts. You can send emails. You can send SMSs. You can insert data into data stores, etc. So a lot of different things that you can do here based off of time series analysis. It's one of the central capabilities. All of this is happening, by the way, on data that's flowing in memory. There's no storage required here. You're not doing a retroactive historic analysis. You're actually evaluating events as they come in over time. So that's core built-in capability. So we've run you through a lot. We're kind of hitting the end of the road for this introductory presentation. I'll leave you with a couple of quick thoughts. We've stepped you through how the growth of GoldenGate Platform has occurred over the years, all the way till today, where I explained some of the streaming use cases. This is really, hopefully makes sense for you now on where the use cases began with high availability disaster recovery database migrations, 20 years ago, stepping through that progression of capabilities towards today, where we see now a ton of interest and uptake around these data lake and streaming analysis types of use cases. And that really defines for us this huge ecosystem of GoldenGate globally with more than 7,000 customers in 180 countries. One of the most popular enterprise integration tools in history. And hopefully this makes sense to you, sort of why that's the case. And then I'll just wrap up by saying, we're battle tested in these huge customer deployments, performance unmatched by anybody else in the industry. And, all these name brand businesses that we all, know and trust with everything from our finances to our healthcare to our government systems, can depend on GoldenGate. And that trust in the technology, that trust in the foundation of what GoldenGate brings is actually the basis for all of those use cases and all of the software development that we do around GoldenGate here at Oracle. So with that, I appreciate your time today. Thanks for listening to this presentation. I hope this was useful in terms of getting to know a little bit more about GoldenGate. Thank you very much.